The morning light slipped through the blinds of the Ellis Diner, casting golden stripes across the worn wooden counter. The hum of an old ceiling fan filled the silence until Marion Ellis flicked on the neon open sign, its faint buzz mingling with the smell of coffee already brewing in the back. Marion moved to the kitchen with quiet efficiency, her apron tied neatly, her hair pulled back in a simple bun. She was a woman who carried the weight of loss in her chest, yet found ways to breathe life into every corner of her world. She poured herself a small cup of coffee, added just 1 spoon of sugar the way she always had, and stood at the window for a moment. Across the street, the town was waking up, children waiting for the school bus, men heading to the mill, women adjusting uniforms for shifts at the nursing home. Marion knew them all. She'd fed them through storms, celebrations, funerals, and birthdays. This diner wasn't just a business. It was a sanctuary. The bell above the door jingled as her first customer entered. "Morning, Miss Ellis," said Mr. Darnell, a retired mechanic whose knotted hands bore the grease of 50 years' labor. "Morning, Darnell. Coffee. You know it." The ritual was grounding. Each greeting, each plate served, was more than transaction. It was a thread in the fragile fabric of community, one Marion had been weaving ever since she and her late husband opened the diner 20 years earlier. He was gone now. Cancer had taken him in silence and pain. But his picture still hung near the cash register, smiling with that same quiet pride she carried in herself. Her granddaughter, Lila, came running from the back with a math workbook tucked under her arm. "Grandma, I did it. Look," she exclaimed, thrusting a page of neatly written fractions into Marion's hands. Marion bent down, adjusting her glasses. "Well, look at that. Balance as clean as the books." She kissed Lila on the forehead. "You'll be running this diner better than me one day." Lila giggled, her hair bouncing in braids. "I don't want to run the diner. I want to build houses." Marion smiled, brushing the child's cheek. "Then you build them tall, strong, and with plenty of light inside." Those were the moments she lived for, the warmth of family, the rhythm of community, the fragile piece of ordinary life. But behind it lingered a shadow she couldn't ignore. The roof leaked whenever rain came heavy. The fridge in the back rattled with a death rattle that no mechanic could fix. Bills stacked neatly in her ledger reminded her every night of debts left from her husband's medical care. She told no one of her private dread. When the regulars filtered in, nurses, bus drivers, a teacher on her way to class, Marion welcomed them with her unbreakable smile. Her laugh rose above the clinking of cups. Even though her body ached from early mornings and late nights, she refused to let struggle erase her dignity. Later, when the breakfast rush eased, Marion sat a corner booth with her checkbook. Numbers filled the page like stubborn weeds. She circled totals, adjusted columns, whispered a prayer under her breath. Outside, the town carried on, but she knew the day would come soon when she'd have to step into the cold marble halls of Riverside Bank. She dreaded it, not for fear of rejection. She had prepared every document, every proof of her worth, but for the way they looked at her, the way men like Charles Whitmore smiled with courtesy while stripping people like her possibility. Still, Marion folded her ledger closed and rose from the booth. She set her shoulders, washed her hands, and returned to the counter. Customers needed tending, coffee needed pouring, and dignity had to be carried like armor. The world outside might not give her grace, but inside this diner, Marion Ellis created it every single day. The sky was heavy with gray when Marion approached Riverside Bank the following week. She had dressed with care, a pressed navy blouse, her late husband's watch on her wrist, and her hair smoothed into place. She wanted no one to say she looked unprepared, unworthy, or small. In her leather bag, she carried years of tax returns, meticulous business records, proof of her diner's profitability, and even letters from longtime customers who pledged their loyalty to her food. The bank's building loomed over Main Street, like a monument carved out of wealth and exclusion. White columns stretched toward the sky, their shadows falling across the cracked sidewalks where children played double dutch and elders sat on stoops. Marion paused before the glass doors, steadying her breath. She whispered a verse from Psalms, then pushed them open. Inside, the air was chilled, the marble floor gleaming beneath the sterile glow of fluorescent lights. A white receptionist with a stiff smile glanced up. "May I help you?" she asked, though her eyes drifted quickly past Marion toward the white man entering behind her. "Yes, ma'am," Marion replied evenly. "I have a 10 o'clock with Mr. Whitmore." The receptionist blinked, surprised, as if the name had been spoken by someone unworthy of saying it. "Take a seat. He'll be with you shortly." Marion lowered herself onto a leather chair. Across the lobby, she noticed a contrast. White businessmen greeted with warm handshakes. White families ushered into offices with gentle laughter. When a young black man in construction boots approached the desk, the receptionist's tone turned clipped, her smile dissolving into suspicion. Marion's chest tightened, not from surprise, but from the cruel familiarity of it. Minutes stretched. Finally, a tall man in a tailored suit emerged from a frosted glass office. Charles Whitmore was everything the town described. Distinguished in appearance, hair silvered at the temples, his smile sharp as a blade. His voice carried the ease of someone used to being obeyed. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, extending a hand. His grip was soft, brief, dismissive. "Come in. Let's see what we have." His office was polished to intimidation. Mahogany desk, shelves lined with law books he likely never read, a family portrait where every smile looked rehearsed. Marion placed her folder neatly before him, her hand steady. "I've come to apply for a small business loan," she began. "I own Ellis Diner. Been running 20 years now. Profitable every year. I'd like to repair the roof, update the refrigeration, and expand the kitchen to keep up with demand." Whitmore leafed through her documents without looking at them, his eyes glancing more often at her face than at the figures that spoke for themselves. "Impressive that you kept it afloat so long," he said smoothly. "But, restaurants are risky, especially niche establishments." Marion's lips pressed together, but she said nothing. She watched him circle one number with his pen as though to find fault. "You have medical debt on your record," he noted. "My husband's treatment," she replied quietly. "It was paid off last year. You'll see the zero balance on page 3. Whitmore skimmed past it, uninterested. "Still, it shows instability. And frankly, Mrs. Ellis, banks like ours have to be cautious. Ambition can lead to overextension." The words landed like stones. His tone was cordial, but beneath it was the same refrain she'd heard in this town her whole life. "You don't belong in the rooms where decisions are made. Stay small. Stay grateful." Through the glass walls of his office, Marion saw the receptionist whispering to another banker, both of them glancing her way. A white woman with a boutique downtown walked past, greeted warmly by name, ushered into a meeting with smiles. Whitmore closed her folder with finality. "I'm afraid I can't approve this loan. My advice? Maintain what you already have. Growth can be dangerous." Marion felt the sting in her chest, but she held his gaze. Her voice remained calm, measured. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Whitmore." He smiled thinly, already moving to rise. "Best of luck." When she stepped out of the office, the cold marble beneath her shoes felt harder than stone. The receptionist avoided her eyes. Outside, the town carried on as though nothing had happened. Marion stood at the top of the steps, her bag heavy with the documents no one cared to see, the denial echoing louder than words. She straightened her shoulders, pulled her coat tighter, and walked back toward her diner, dignity intact, though the injustice had carved its mark deeper into her resolve. The lunch crowd at Ella's Diner was winding down when the rain began, fat drops drumming against the patched roof. Seeping through the cracks Marion knew she could no longer ignore. She moved a bucket beneath the worst of it, the sound of water echoing like a metronome against her resolve. The bank's rejection still sat heavy on her chest, but she had no time to dwell. Plates needed washing, customers needed tending, life kept moving. The bell above the door chimed, and in walked Rosa, a young woman who worked the late shift at the mill. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she clutched an envelope. "Miss Marion," she whispered, sliding into a booth. "They foreclosed on Mama's house. We've been trying to get a loan to save it. Riverside said no, just like they always do." Marion sat with her, taking the girl's hands in her own. "You hear me, baby? A house is wood and brick. A family is flesh and spirit. Don't let them steal more than walls. But as Rosa cried, another customer, a boy no older than 19, pulled out his phone. "Miss Marion," he said, his voice tight, "you should see this." He turned the screen toward her. A video, posted just hours earlier, already spreading crosstown. Someone had recorded Marion's meeting at Riverside through the glass office wall. The angle was grainy, the audio muffled, but Whitmore's words cut sharp to the static. "People like you should be careful about taking on more debt." The boys scrolled down. Hundreds of comments, dozens of shares. The clip had already become the talk of the town. "Lord have mercy," Marion whispered, heat rising in her cheeks. She hadn't realized anyone was watching. Within minutes, the diner filled with murmurs. Customers replayed the video on their phones, shaking their heads in disbelief. An older man muttered, "Ain't nothing new, just finally on tape." A nurse in scrub said, "My brother got the same treatment." They told him his lawn care business was too unstable. Voices overlapped, frustration spilling like the rain outside. The door burst open again, and in stepped a local reporter, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Ellis," he said, breathless, "we saw the footage. Would you like to make a statement?" Marion froze. Her instinct was to retreat, to hide her humiliation behind the safety of silence. But the eyes of her community were on her, Rosa still trembling, the young boy still holding up his phone, her granddaughter peeking from the kitchen with confusion etched on her little face. She drew a steadying breath. "No, I don't have a statement," she said softly, her voice carrying enough to silence the room. "What you saw is what it is. Nothing new. We've been living this a long time. But maybe now folks will finally pay attention." The reporter scribbled furiously. Cameras flashed. Someone at the counter recorded her words. The weight of it pressed harder on her shoulders than the denial itself. The knowledge that her private wound had become public spectacle. Yet in the eyes around her, she saw something else too. Solidarity. Anger, yes, but also recognition. Like a wound being named aloud for the first time. By evening, the video had spread beyond the town. Local TV picked it up, pairing it with statistics about Riverside's abysmal loan record for black applicants. Civil rights groups began tagging the footage online. The comments multiplied, some supportive, others dripping with racist bile. Marion avoided reading them, but Lila overheard at school the next morning. "Your grandma got shut down by the bank. Maybe she should stick to frying eggs." Marion clenched her jaw when she heard, but she did not bend. She wiped her granddaughter's tears, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "Baby, don't ever be ashamed of me, or of us. The shame's theirs." Still, each word of scorn fueled a quiet fire inside her. Whitmore had meant to dismiss her with a smile, a signature, a polite refusal. Instead, he had exposed himself before the entire town, before the wider world. And though she had not chosen this fight, it had found her all the same. She returned to her diner that night, the rain easing into silence, and pulled her husband's photograph from the wall. She stared into his eyes, whispering into the quiet, "They think I'm small. They don't know what you taught me. They don't know what I built." And for the first time in days, Marion allowed herself a faint smile. The injustice was real, but so was the strength rising to meet it. The diner was quiet after closing, the neon sign switched off, leaving only the soft glow of a single lamp by the register. The rain had cleared, but puddles shimmered outside on the cracked asphalt. Marion sat alone in her corner booth, paper spread across the table like puzzle pieces. Her reading glasses slid low on her nose as she scribbled notes in the margins of spreadsheets and financial reports. Most people in town knew Marion as a widow who ran a humble diner, a woman who worked with her hands and lived by her faith. Few remembered, or perhaps had ever known, that she had once been more than that, before the diner became her livelihood, before cancer tore through her H. Marion had worked beside her husband, Robert, in a small but determined community investment group. It began years earlier, when the mill where Robert worked closed without warning, leaving hundreds of black families adrift. While others protested in the streets, Robert and Marion had chosen a quieter path. They organized neighbors, pooling savings in church basements and living rooms, creating a network of loans and grants to keep small businesses alive. Robert had a gift for numbers, Marion for people. Together, they built something fragile but powerful, a shield against the very kind of discrimination she had faced at Riverside. When Robert fell sick, Marion had carried the torch alone, though few saw the work behind the scenes. She had kept attending nonprofit board meetings, learning the intricacies of community finance, absorbing knowledge from lawyers and policy experts who admired her tenacity. Slowly, she pieced together a quiet education, how to read the language of contracts, how to navigate grant applications, how to decipher the fine print bankers use to trap people. Now, staring at Whitmore's rejection letter, Marion's lips curved into the faintest smile. He thought he had dismissed a poor widow with a dream too big for her grasp. He hadn't seen the years of files tucked neatly in her cabinets, the binders filled with meeting minutes, the connections she had nurtured with regional nonprofits and federal minority business programs. He hadn't seen the notebooks filled with calculations she and Robert used to do at the kitchen table long after midnight. Her granddaughter, Lila, padded out from the back in pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Grandma, you still working?" Marion closed the binder gently. "Just thinking, baby." "About the bank, man?" "Yes." Marion smoothed Lila's braid with tender fingers. "But don't you worry. Your grandma knows a few things he don't." The child climbed into her lap, resting her head against Marion's chest. "Like what?" "Like how to turn a no into something bigger than a yes. Like how folks standing together can be stronger than one man sitting on a pile of money. And like how sometimes the best revenge is building something they said you never could." Lila's breathing slowed, her body softening into sleep. Marion held her close, feeling the weight of both burden and blessing. The next morning, Marion rose early, dressed not in her diner apron, but in a simple gray suit she kept pressed at the back of her closet. She drove past Riverside Bank without slowing, instead heading to a small office above the hardware store where the nonprofit board convened every month. Inside, she was greeted not as a diner owner, but as a colleague, a strategist, a woman whose counsel was valued. "We saw the video," one of the board members said, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. "It's disgraceful, but it's also an opportunity. People are paying attention." Marion set her folder on the table, her voice calm, deliberate. "Then let's not waste it. We've been saving and waiting for years. It's time we put our plan into motion." A chorus of agreement rose around the diner. Younger voices demanded action, protests, petitions, boycotts. Older voices urged caution, wary of what retaliation might come. Through it all, Marion listened, her hand steady on the counter, her presence an anchor. That night, a local TV crew arrived, cameras cutting to the intimate glow of the diner. The reporter, a young black woman named Denise, approached Marion with hesitation. "Mrs. Ellis, would you be willing to speak on record?" Marion hesitated, feeling the eyes of her community pressing in. She had never sought the spotlight. But she thought of Rosa, losing her mother's house, of the young man denied a lawn care loan, of the children who would grow up believing rejection was their inheritance unless someone told a different story. She stepped forward, her voice low but resolute. "This isn't just about me. This is about every person in this town who's been told they don't belong in the places where decisions are made. Riverside has built a wall, brick by brick, made of refusals and dismissals. All I did was knock on the door, and they show the world what's really inside." The cameras captured it. The crowd in the diner erupted with applause, not the wild kind but the heavy, affirming kind that comes from years of unspoken truth finally given voice. Within days, her words aired on the evening news. National outlets picked it up. Emails began flooding the diner's inbox. Support from activists, offers of legal help, even stories from strangers across the country who had faced the same discrimination. But not all attention was welcome. Whitmore himself appeared on local television, his tone patronizing as ever. "Riverside Bank treats all applicants fairly," he insisted. "Mrs. Ellis's case was unfortunate, but not unusual. Our decisions are based purely on financial stability, not personal characteristics." Marion watched the broadcast from her kitchen, her hands still as stone. She knew his smile was crafted for the cameras, his words honed by lawyers. But she also knew that the community no longer believed him. Still, the pushback grew. Anonymous phone calls came to the diner at night, filled with muttered threats. Online comments turned ugly, with some calling her a troublemaker, others spewing slurs she hadn't heard aloud in years. Lila came home from school with shoulders slumped, whispering, "Grandma, they're saying you're going to bring the town down." Marion knelt before her, holding the child's face in her hands. "Baby, they said the same thing to your great-granddaddy when he fought to vote. They said it to your uncle when he went off to college. They'll always say it when you push against the door they meant to keep shut. But listen to me. What we're doing isn't bringing the town down. It's lifting it up." The girl nodded slowly, her eyes wet but fierce. Marion kissed her forehead, then rose to her feet, feeling the weight of every eye on her. Neighbors, reporters, allies, enemies alike. She was no longer just a diner owner denied a loan. She had become the center of a story bigger than herself, one that demanded courage she hadn't realized she still possessed. And deep inside, she knew the time for silence had passed. The fight was no longer private. It was here in the open where the whole world could see. The courthouse clock chimed noon as Marion stepped into the diner's back office, the door clicking shut behind her. On the table sat a spread of documents, loan ledgers, stock purchase agreements, federal grant applications, all neatly stacked, annotated in her tight handwriting. The low hum of conversation from the diner outside faded as she focused, the air in the small office charged with purpose. Across from her sat Andre Collins, a civil rights attorney who had grown up just blocks away and used to sweep her diner floors for extra cash when he was a teenager. He was in his 30s now, sharp suit, sharper mind, his voice calm but edged with conviction. "Marion, what you're up against isn't just one man," Andre said, flipping to the bank's records. "It's a system designed to make sure folks like you never even get a chance to try. But we've got them cornered. This video, the loan data, they can't explain it away anymore." Marion leaned back, her arms folded, her eyes weary but alert. "Andre, I don't want revenge. I want fairness. I want people to be able to walk into that bank and not have to carry proof of their humanity on top of proof of their finances." "And you're going to get it," Andre replied. "We'll hit them on two fronts, legal and financial." The legal front was straightforward but powerful. Filing a discrimination lawsuit with evidence of Riverside's decades-long patterns of denying black applicants while approving less qualified white ones. Andre had already compiled testimonies from other townsfolk, their stories echoing Marion's in heartbreaking detail. The numbers alone painted the truth. Approval rates for black business owners were half of what they were for whites. The financial front was Marion's domain. For weeks, she'd been working quietly with her late husband's old network, pulling strings she'd tucked away for years. Together with allies from a nonprofit board and a few sympathetic investors, they began buying Riverside Bank stock, slowly, quietly, strategically. What started as a whisper of possibility was becoming real. At night, Marion sat at her kitchen table under the soft glow of a single lamp, poring over reports while her granddaughter slept. She traced the numbers like scripture, her pen moving in precise strokes. With each share purchased, with each grant approved, she felt the balance of power shifting by inches. Her allies expanded. Denise, the young reporter, kept covering the story, her articles sharper each week, exposing the human toll of Riverside's policies. A local pastor offered his church basement for strategy meetings. Business owners who had once been too afraid to speak now stepped forward, offering their voices, their signatures, their savings. Still, the resistance was fierce. Anonymous letters appeared at Marion's doorstep. "Stop before you regret it." Rumors swirled that Riverside would foreclose on the diner. Some friends urged her to back down, but Marion remained composed. When fear pressed against her ribs, she remembered her husband's words on long nights when they had first started the investment group. "The only way they win is if we believe they're too big to fight." One evening, after a long day of planning, Andre spread the lawsuit documents across her table. "Once we file this, there's no going back. They'll come after you harder than ever." Marion adjusted her glasses, her hand steady. "Andre, they've been coming after me my whole life. The only difference is this time I'm not alone." He nodded, sliding the papers toward her. She signed with deliberate strokes, her name flowing onto the page like a declaration. The next morning, the lawsuit made headlines. Riverside Bank was officially under investigation for discriminatory practices. Whitmore appeared again on television, his composure strained, dismissing the claims as misunderstandings. But even as he spoke, Marion's coalition continued to grow stronger, and the crowd murmured, some scoffing openly. Then it was Marion's turn. She rose slowly, her hands resting lightly on the table, her voice even but full of weight. "Mr. Whitmore says Riverside serves his community. But I ask you, who does he mean when he says community? Because it isn't mine." She held up a folder, the pages trembling slightly in her grip, but her voice steady. "These are records of loan applications submitted over the past 10 years. 93% of black-owned businesses were denied. 93. That is not an accident. That is not a misunderstanding. That is systemic." She laid the folder on the table with a sharp slap. The sound echoed through the chamber. "And here," she continued, pulling another file, "are testimonies. Families who walked into Riverside with perfect credit, with savings, with dreams, and were told, like I was, that they weren't ready. Families who then watched their white neighbors, with half the resources, get approved. People who were told come back later, to wait, to lower their expectations. You denied us, but you funded them. That isn't banking. That's gatekeeping." The camera zoomed in as Whitmore's jaw clenched. He leaned toward his lawyers, whispering furiously. Marion straightened her shoulders, her eyes sweeping the crowd. "I didn't want this fight. I came asking for help, for the same chance you'd give anyone else. But instead, I was humiliated in front of my granddaughter, told I wasn't enough. And when I walked out of that bank, I decided never again for me, never again for anyone in this town." She paused, her voice thickening, her eyes shining. "So I bought shares. I gathered allies. And last week, I became Riverside's largest shareholder." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even some council members leaned forward, startled. Whitmore's face flushed a deep red. "That's right," Marion said softly, but with a steel edge. "The same woman you dismissed as not ready now owns the very bank you tried to keep out of reach. And I'm here to tell you, your reign of exclusion is over." The room erupted, applause, shouts, a wave of sound so loud the panel had to pound their gavels. Whitmore shouted into his mic, his voice cracking with fury. "This is outrageous. She's manipulating." But the noise drowned him out. Marion simply sat back down, folding her hands, her face calm. She didn't need to shout. The truth had already spoken. The cameras captured everything. Whitmore unraveling, Marion composed, the community rallying behind her. It wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a reckoning. For the first time, Whitmore looked small. And for the first time, the town saw clearly who truly held the power. The days after the hearing felt different in Stovall. It wasn't just that Whitmore had been stripped of his position. The board forced him out within 48 hours, under pressure from shareholders and public outrage. It wasn't just that the council launched a formal inquiry into Riverside's practices, or that the Department of Justice sent investigators into town. It was something subtler, something deeper. For the first time in decades, black families walked into Riverside Bank without their shoulders hunched. Fathers carried their children proudly to the counter to open savings accounts. Women in Sunday dresses asked about business loans without bracing for rejection. The air inside that marble lobby seemed less suffocating, the fluorescent lights a little less cruel. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but something had shifted. Marion sat by the window of her small living room, watching her granddaughter Nia skip rope on the sidewalk. The sun slanted low, casting gold across the cracked pavement, catching the edges of Nia's laughter like music. Marion's hands rested on her lap, still, except for the gentle rub of her thumb across the old leather strap of her husband's watch. She thought of him often now, his voice reminding her, on hard days, that dignity was not a gift given but a mantle claimed. A knock came at the door. When Marion opened it, she found 3 young men standing there, local entrepreneurs who had been denied at Riverside years ago. They held a bouquet of sunflowers, their hands awkward but eyes shining. "Miss Marion," one of them said, his voice catching, "we just wanted to say thank you. We got approved today. First time. And it's because of you." She pressed the flowers to her chest, her eyes burning. She had no speech for them, no grand reply. She only smiled and nodded, whispering, "Go build something beautiful." Word of Marion's fight continued to ripple outward. Newspapers from Atlanta and New York, even Chicago, ran features about the grandmother who bought the bank. The story spread beyond Stovall. Syndicated articles, morning shows, podcasts. Some commentators framed it as poetic justice, others as a lesson in economic power. But to Marion, it was never about headlines. It was about her granddaughter skipping rope, without fear of inheriting the same walls she'd spent her life pushing against. One evening, the church held a gathering in Marion's honor, the sanctuary filled with voices raised in him, candles flickering against stained glass. Children ran up to hug her, elders touched her hand, and strangers she had never met before whispered blessings as they passed. When the pastor invited her to the pulpit, Marion walked slowly, gripping the rail, her steps deliberate. She didn't speak long. "This isn't my victory," she told them. "This is ours. They told us to wait, to lower our eyes, to accept less. And we said no. We stood, we fought with dignity, and we claimed what was already ours by right. Let this not be the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter for Stovall. A chapter where our children don't just survive, but thrive." One evening, the church held a gathering in Marion's honor, the sanctuary filled with voices raised in him, candles flickering against stained glass. Children ran up to hug her, elders touched her hand, and strangers she had never met before whispered blessings as they passed. When the pastor invited her to the pulpit, Marion walked slowly, gripping the rail, her steps deliberate. She didn't speak long. "This isn't my victory," she told them. "This is ours. They told us to wait, to lower our eyes, to accept less. And we said no. We stood, we fought with dignity, and we claimed what was already ours by right. Let this not be the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter for Stovall. A chapter where our children don't just survive, but thrive." Applause thundered, but Marion's eyes drifted to Nia in the front pew, clapping with her small palms, face lit up with pride. That was enough. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Marion stood alone on her porch. The cicadas hummed in the darkness. The stars spattered across the sky like spilled salt. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, letting the summer air fill her lungs. She thought about the cost, the sleepless nights, the weight of scrutiny, the memories of being dismissed and diminished. Victory had not erased those scars, but it had transformed them, made them part of something larger, something enduring. Nia came outside in her pajamas, barefoot on the porch boards. "Grandma," she whispered, leaning into her side, "does this mean we're free now?" Marion swallowed, her throat tightening. She wrapped an arm around the little girl, pulling her close. "It means we're freer, baby, and tomorrow we'll get freer still, as long as we keep fighting with our heads high." The two of them stood there, gazing out at the quiet street, a legacy passed silently from one generation to the next. The battle had been won, but the struggle would continue. And Marion knew, with a clarity that steadied her heart, that the future belonged to them,